So this is going to be quadratic formula with imaginary numbers. If you can work with the quadratic formula with imaginaries, you can work quadratic formula with real numbers. All right, so the only difference is that when we take our square root, we're going to have some negative values, and that's where the imaginaries come into play. So here's a quadratic, 3x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 0. We're going to solve this. We're going to try and figure out our x-intercepts, our zeros, if it has any, based off of our quadratic formula. So what I do to organize is I'm going to create this nice little t-chart. And in the top left is just going to be your A value, B value, and your C value. So you can see that our A value was 3, our B value was 4, our C value is also 4. Now the next one, the top right of this little chart that I made, this little T-chart, is going to be the discriminant value. Now, just so we remember, our discriminant value can be a couple things. There's 3 things that it can do. All right, if our discriminant is greater than 0, we have reals, and we'll have 2 real. If it is equal to 0, sorry, let's put that up there, 2 real, we'll get 1 real 0. If it is less than 0, we'll have 2 imaginaries, right? So those are the situations that we're going to run into. Do we get real numbers? Do we get imaginary numbers? And it's really based off of the value that we're going to get once we find this discriminant. Now, the discriminant is that b squared minus 4a, 4ac. So here you can see that I'm going to take my b value and square it. I am going to subtract 4 times my a value times my c value. Now, once I do all that operation, I'm going to go ahead and get negative 32. So this is where we can start to evaluate and determine, well, wait a minute, I got a negative number that's less than 0. I know I'm working with imaginaries, and we always have to remember imaginaries will always come in pairs. If this was a positive 32, we would have gotten 2 real zeros when we finish up this problem. If this was equal to 0, we would have only gotten 1 real number as our 0. All right, but in this case, it is less than 0. We're going to get 2 imaginaries. Now, this bottom left corner is where I'm going to start to do some of my figuring out. The bottom right hand, we're going to go ahead and finish everything up. So I'm going to go ahead and start to write out what the quadratic formula is. It's x equals the opposite of my b value. So if my b value in this case is 4, I'm going to write it as a negative 4. If it was a negative 4, I would have written it as a positive 4. But this one is going to go positive to negative. I'm going to write my plus or minus the square root of my discriminant, which is negative 32, all over 2 times my a value, so 2 times 3. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and continue with this on this side. I just want to rewrite it a little bit. So now that we're working with imaginaries, we can see that we're taking the square root of a negative. I'm going to write an I in front of that square root so it can become a positive 32. So it's going to become negative 4 plus or minus I square root 32 all over 6. All right, now we're good with this box. I'm going to jump over into my last box over here. So you can see that I'm going to write x equals negative 4 plus or minus I square root 32 all over 6. This next piece, and we're almost done, is going to be this 32 right here. What we want to do is we want to simplify it as much as possible. All right, so I'm going to always break it up as the largest perfect square and the largest non-perfect square. Now, some of us might use 8 and 4. That's great. You can take the square root of 4. You can't take the square root of 8. All right, but there is still another perfect square within 8. So that's why I say try and find the largest perfect square number. If that means you have to start taking your number 32 and divide it by 4, divide it by 9, divide it by 16, divide it by 25, just continually keep doing that, do it. All right. Now in this case, I'm going to break it up as 16 and 2. I can take the square root of 16, which is going to be 4. I cannot take the square root of 2, so I'm going to leave it as that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some rewriting. This is going to be negative 4 plus or minus. Now, instead of I square root of 32, I'm going to write it as 4i square root of 2. And that's all divided by 6. Now, you can see that this is going to be my last piece. I highlighted the negative 4, the 4, and the 6. Never highlight the square root. You can't do anything with it anymore. You simplify that as much as possible. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and divide each of these numbers by 2 because we always want to simplify it as much as possible. This is the easiest way to simplify it. So divide all 3 of these numbers. Divide the negative 4, the positive 4, and that positive 6. Divide them all by 2. And your final answer becomes negative 2 plus or minus 2i square root of 2 all over 3. And that is completely simplified using the quadratic formula with imaginary values.